So we are now on Facebook and we are in the comfort of our own homes. This is a first for us, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's brand new.
We're still getting used to the technology. And can I just have a little disclaimer here that Mareka is the person responsible for pushing all the buttons today. Not
Thank
me
you,
for
Paul.
once. I've just got to sit here in my studio, in my office, looking
And
into a
look pretty.
camera. Yeah, I've got the easy part. You've got to worry about being live and recording. But this is cool. It is, I guess you could say, a brand new start really for the Coaching Hour, because until now, we've been recording the Coaching Hour podcast from a studio. But unfortunately, that studio is no more. And so we've had to make alternative plans. And the alternative plans are that we are at home, not quite in our pajamas, but we are at home and we are bringing you the very first Coaching Hour podcast from home. And we have a wonderful guest to set the scene for this, another edition of the Coaching Hour podcast. And Mary not with us today either. If this is a first for you, normally Mary joins us as one of the, I guess you could say, members of or partners of Coaches Network South Africa. She works very closely with Mareka, although Coaches Network South Africa is Mareka's project. Mary is kind of like her right-hand man, as it were, or right-hand woman. When it comes to that. But Mary can't join us today. Sorry, Mary, you're missing out on the first one. She would have liked this because she would have been in her pajamas.
I know.
At home.
Yes, true.
So we do have just the three of us. When I say the three of us, it is Mareka, myself, Paul, and then we're joined by a wonderful guest who we have featured before in previous editions of the Coaching Hour. But I'm going to allow you to do the intros, Mareka.
Good. Thank you so much, Paul. So today we are talking to Jabu Zwane. He's a mindset development specialist and also the founder of the Mindset Development Institute. You're an executive coach, a global speaker, facilitator, trainer. You wear many hats. And we're talking about a very relevant topic today. South Africa being, I would say, the hub of entrepreneurship. Whether you have your own salon, whether you are selling firewood, whether you have a podcast, I'm a coach, you have to build your personal brand. So we are going to talk about the 3 A's of your personal brand, which I'm very excited about, given the fact that we are building a brand new version of the Coaching Hour today, which is exciting. But Jabu, just tell us a little bit about why you are passionate about this and also what you do as an executive coach.
Well, I mean, let me start off with the first question about why am I passionate about this whole branding. I think it's crucial to understand that, people, there's this thing of perception, and perception is about how people see things. So when you're a business, how do people see you? You don't always have control on how they see you, but you can have a degree of influence of how people see you. And I think that's a crucial element about it, is that, for example, when you think of a particular brand, let's think about, South Africa, for example, as a brand, what comes to mind? Or if you think about a particular personality that does a particular thing, let's think about somebody in my speaking fraternity, like a Fusi, for example, what comes to mind? The brand themselves, they don't necessarily have too much control on how people see them, but you can influence that. And that's what I want to talk about. And because that ties up to what I do as a coach as well, is that, let's say, for example, if you're talking about somebody who helps people to succeed, when they look at you, do they perceive that you can do what you say you can do? If you say that I'm a great doctor, what is it that makes you great? What do you measure that against? If you say that I'm great at helping people to succeed, what proof do you have? If I look at you without having that proof, can I at least for a second entertain the idea that you can help me to succeed? So that's why I'm passionate about that. And I think as a previously disadvantaged person, as a Black person in South Africa, it's one of those things I needed to learn when I went into business, without necessarily the connections, without the relationships, without the experience, without the money, without the infrastructure, without the resources. How do I how do I push myself, or how do I present myself in such a way that people think that I can do what I say I can do. That's why I'm passionate about it. And I think a lot of people actually need that the way that I need it still.
It's important because in South Africa, most people have a little side business or they start their own business. Being in South Africa, we just have that entrepreneurial spirit. So what does the 3 A's, refer to? Why is it important to have a personal or to build that brand?
Okay, let me talk to what you've mentioned already twice about South Africa being active in that space. Are you aware that actually in the there's an index called the Global Entrepreneurship, I think it's Global Entrepreneurship Index, yeah, which comes up every year, that South Africa actually, in Africa, we are performing at the least of our potential. Really? We are right at the bottom. We are performing at like less than 1% of our potential entrepreneurially. Nigeria is at the top at about 7% in Africa.
Not surprising though, not that we make this about politics, but not surprising when we live in a country where a huge percentage of the working people or people who are able to work are actually just being paid to do nothing by receiving grants. So if you're in a society where you're encouraged to do nothing, I guess it's hardly surprising that the entrepreneurship levels are low. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think, it's a bit more complex than that. I think a big part of that, more than the 350, which everybody knows is not very helpful, incentive to actually discourage anybody from doing anything. It's more the frustration of, let me put it in this way again, the very same Global Entrepreneurship Index says that we are in the top 20 countries that have entrepreneurship summits and meetings, and the spirit is there. As far as the entrepreneurial spirit, we are in the top 20. So it's not a lack of will or desire, but it's the frustration of bureaucracy. It's the frustration of a lack of infrastructure. It's a frustration of systemic marginalization of those people who are not part of that ecosystem. And it doesn't matter. Of course, it affects mostly Black people, but there are also quite a lot of, pretty much if you're South African and not part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that already exists, it's very difficult for you to penetrate and to get a foot in. So their frustration is there, where as South Africans who want to change our lives, it's very difficult because it's not easy. It's not easy. So that is basically one of the reasons why then it's not, and remember again, potential isn't so much about a lack of activity, but it's the fact that even if you are active, you're not reaching your optimal level of performance, of output.
And I guess, Jabu, some of those factors are beyond our control. And some of those factors are very much within our control. As you said yourself, you are, to use the term, a previously disadvantaged Black person who perhaps until you discovered the way out, you would have been in the same basket as many others. What did you do differently? I think that's what we try to get to in the coaching hour, is to understand how successful people became successful, or how you are working to be successful. And I know Marek has mentioned the 3 A's. Maybe you can just refresh us on that as well as you answer that question.
Sure. I borrowed it actually from one of these speakers. I think his name is Michael Virardi. He's like one of those top global speakers, and he speaks about the 10 by 10 by 10 rule. I don't know if it's his own original concept, but it was very similar to an idea that I already have, which is the 3 A's. And the 10 by 10 rule is about understanding the following things: that people make judgments, of course, first impressions. They make judgments about you from 10 meters away. 10 meters away is about your appearance. They make judgments about you for the body language, and that is within 10 inches. Like when somebody's closer to you, then they can feel the energy, and they're making judgments about your body language. And then the last thing is then the words you say. And then in my 3 A's, I have, similar to what he's talking about. So I've got A, as appearance, and I've got second one, A, as attitude, and we'll break that down. And then lastly, articulation. And I use the word articulation on purpose because it has got specific components that we're going to talk about. So if we think about appearance, for example, appearance is about understanding a couple of things. The way you dress says something about you as a person and how you want the people to, what you want the people to think about you. If you are in the business of selling yourself as a brand, you want people to associate your appearance with components that make your brand what you want your brand to be, the quality of your brand, the perception about the quality of your product, the perception about the quality of your solutions, the perception about your competencies as the person who's providing that solution, the perception of reliability, dependability, not just about the solution itself, but once I've worked with you, am I going to be satisfied? If there's a service afterwards, can I expect you then to deliver that service? And so when I see you for the first time, Paul, and then you're saying to me, I'm a broadcaster, and this is what I do. When I'm looking at you and you start to, in your body language, and you start to open your mouth, do I instantly think, I would love to have this guy?
Maybe I should have my headphones on at the moment, Jabu. At least I've got a wall of CDs behind me, if that helps.
Yeah, it makes it very interesting. The very fascinating image there at the back. So I mean, your appearance is crucial. Your appearance is very, very, very important, especially if you're another person who's very well known. I think one of the things about appearance is that if I'm not very well known, how can I leverage the reality that people are fascinated by things like color? People are fascinated by things like that look interesting, that look different, that are out of the norm. How can I leverage? How can I then make myself easily visible in the sea of people who offer the same type of things? So it isn't just about the fact that I dress a particular way. Like if I, for example, walk in the room, I'm always very mindful in certain situations. I literally plan my every single item I'm going to wear. It means something. And it's going to stand out, whether it's the color of the hanky on a very dark suit, whether it's a shirt that is very bright, that has that is worn on a dark suit to bring certain things about me out. I want people to, in certain settings, I want to get that attention that I'm around. At least a degree of fascination about who is this person, what do they do, should I talk to them? I wonder, people must wonder about, what is it that you do? And if we understand that, then we start to really think about even things like, okay, in terms of my logo, let's talk about it. You know that there's a research that's been proven about 2-color logos do better than more than 2-color logos. And there are certain types of logos that immediately communicate quality, credibility, trust, dependability, just simply by the way that the logo looks, whether it be the writing, whether it be the sign, like those type of things. Like, for example, someone would have like multiple, they'll have like 100 different types of images on their logo, and then your brain is fighting to make out, okay, fine, I'm interested, but I'm thinking, what is this thing? And the thing is that if my fascination goes into wondering, then I start to doubt, because then there's confusion. Thinking, if you're going to send me out a logo that is so confusing, are you going to be as effective as you say you're going to be when you're doing the job? So, I mean, that is so important to think about those kind of things. Like, how do we leverage the reality that 99% of my processing information that is coming to me is happening at a passive state, at a subconscious state. I'm not actively negotiating the different details live, but they're happening without me being aware that they're happening. And what are those things? So things like color, things like spacing, for example, in terms of your logo, when you're communicating on a poster, What is the spacing? How much activity is there on that particular post? And what does that poster communicate about your brand? When you're communicating something on social media, let's talk about you're communicating something on social media. What are you saying about, what is it saying about your brand? What is it saying about you as the person that is delivering those solutions, your understanding of the problem that the person is dealing with, that your competencies as somebody who's going to solve that problem, and those kind of things. I don't know if that kind of helps.
Makes sense. So it doesn't matter what you do, appearance matters.
Appearance matters. I mean, there are many studies that have been done. If you just do a simple Google search, you'll see there are a couple of books. I think there's one that's talking about the power of individual appearance. Like when there's this study that was done about, for example, the quote project. So they took 3 groups of people. 2 groups, they gave them white coats. And they said to one group that the coat is a doctor's coat. The other one they said is a painter's coat. The other one they said no coat for you. And then they gave them this IQ test on the computer to see how quickly they can solve the problem. You want to guess what the results were? Who did better than who in those
doctors?
The doctors.
Doctors did well. And who did better between the painters and the guys who didn't have any coats?
Probably no coats.
Yeah.
Because they were who they wanted to be in their mind without being attached to the representation of a coat. And in many people's minds, I suppose, depending on where you come from, a painter is perhaps considered lower on the ladder, inverted commas, and I'm not judging any painters, than how you might judge yourself, unless, of course, you're a painter. If you're a painter with a painter's coat, then you'd probably do very well because you associate with that.
That makes a lot of sense, except no, they did the same way.
Okay.
They were
Oh,
on
really?
the level. They were on the level.
So
Interesting.
no coats and painters' coats were level.
Were level.
Okay.
Interesting.
And then
So what do you take from that, Jabu?
I think it's because 2 things. It all depends on whether you've got an aim or no aim. If you have a low aim, it's the same as having no aim. The outcome is the same.
That's interesting. And Jabu, the second one, if I remember correctly, you said is attitude.
Yeah, it's attitude. And attitude is, again, it's about, number 1, your mental disposition, which then comes out in your physical expression. Mental disposition, and then the way that it expresses itself in your physicality. So if you're talking about nonverbal cues as far as, are you somebody who smiles, right? I think on one of the videos that the same guy that mentioned earlier on mentions that the Chinese proverb that says that if you're serving people, if you cannot serve people, if you cannot smile, don't become my customers, don't serve people. Don't go into the business of serving people if you cannot smile, because you understand that at the end of the day, I mean, a smile always breaks. It breaks a person. Like, you can be having the worst day and somebody smiles at you and it does something to you. And I always say to my clients in coaching, like, that you are on the borderline depression when you cannot even return back the smile the smile of a small baby.
Sure. That's true.
Like, if you look at that innocent child that is pure, that is cute, that represents everything that you want to protect and care for, and then it gives you something as beautiful as a smile, but you are so out of it that you cannot even return back that smile. Then you know that you are right there on that borderline of depression, and you need to then do something about your life. So go ahead, sorry.
Yes, Jabu. I know it's reminding me of your story. I want you to share your story when you went overseas to find a job, and how your attitude actually changed things for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I realized that in South Africa, there's certain perceptions about me as a person. First of all, I was a pastor for almost 10 years. I hadn't been actively involved in the corporate space for some time, and I looked for different jobs, and I couldn't find a job in this country But I'd been traveling overseas and I had friends overseas, and I decided, you know what, let me go to the USA and let me just go and, you know, look for something while I'm building my brand as a coach, as a global speaker, as a facilitator and trainer. So that was my move. And I moved over there and I started, you know, doing a bit of work over there. But when I was over there, understanding again that perception is everything, I started putting forward what I do from the United States to the South Africans. Because number one, I understood this, that in our country, unfortunately, or in the world, America has branded itself as an image of competency, of quality, of what's popular, of what is acceptable. So it didn't even matter what kind of work I did actually in the United States, as long as I was able to do my work from the USA and push it back to my people over here. And by the time that I came back to South Africa, I came back to so much work.
And
are you saying, Jabu, that the simple fact that you were in America, which is associated, or a country that's associated with success, and ability and skill and aptitude and all of those things, just the mere fact that you were there changed the perception of Jabu Zwane here in South Africa?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
A bit like Charlize Theron in some ways. Would she be where she was if she was still in South Africa? I mean, never mind that there's a far smaller movie making market here, but I guess she's the perfect example of someone who leaped to another country and became an A-list celebrity. That would never have happened if she'd stayed here.
Trevor Noah. Black Coffee.
True.
I forget his name, but Mbedu. She just got nominated now for an award. What's her name? But his last name is Mbedu. I mean, there's so many. I think about even you know that even in NASA that there are a couple of South Africans. In fact, the head of innovation in NASA is a South African guy.
Wow.
I mean, there's so many countless amounts. There's a guy that I know, for example, who's also in the space of what I'm doing, moved to Canada. And they get there and they do the kind of, you need to understand that you don't control necessarily perception, because perception is made up, of course, of how do you view me as a person, but it made also globally. And globally, certain fields are owned, or they're dictated to, they're influenced by the people who have branded themselves as catalysts, as the front runners of those things. Like basketball is America, American football, of course, is America. Talking about now, you know, sprinting, we're talking about Jamaica. If we're talking about innovation as far as IT and things like that, India is beginning to emerge on top. Kenya is starting to do some great work as far as IT and development is concerned. You know, Nigeria has branded itself as that bold Africa, that confident Africa, the most successful group of migrants anywhere in the world. And that's why people like Vusiti Mbego are moving into West Africa. Many countries are moving into West Africa. They're bringing those people in because they have branded themselves as a certain, you know, as experts, as reliable, as I'm kind of struggling to find words right now, but that's how they branded themselves, and that's how they come forward. Talking about like Singapore as far as finances is concerned. If you understand that, then you understand that your attitude shouldn't be, I'm fighting against what's wrong, what's not working in the country. But you're better off, we win better when you say, what is working? What do I need to do to have what is working? And then once you get to the certain level of power, independence, being well-resourced, being credible and respectable, then you can begin to dictate certain terms for yourself, and you can have a degree of power to change what is working. But unfortunately, so many of us are, in terms of our attitude, we're lamenting everything that is not working, crying about it, talking about it, writing about it, tweeting about it. having arguments about it and then fighting with our wives and our neighbors about it. That doesn't get you anywhere. You got to think about
Jabu,
it. Yeah.
to interject here, because I'm loving this story. In a nutshell, and not everyone has the ability to pack up and move overseas like you did, but in a nutshell, what changed then? When Jabu Zwane went to the USA, you've indicated that the perception is largely what this is all about, and success can be largely based on perception. What changed, and how different was Jabu Zwane when he returned from the United States versus the Jabu who arrived? I'd like to understand that process a little bit more, because I'm hoping that the answer here isn't that we all have to pack up and leave and come back in order to be successful.
The answer for me is very simple. I think is that what works? What is that is working? In South Africa, if I'm not able to go overseas, what's working? I say this all the time to people who look like me. English is not an enemy. For a Black person, English is an advantage. I can use it in ways that neither the two of you, and I think I've mentioned this before, that the two of you cannot be able to use it, because it's a point of fascination for me. That's why I constantly work on it. I constantly work on how do I leverage this thing that is an advantage for me. So I grow my vocabulary. I make 100% sure that I don't struggle to correlate my thoughts and to bring about the points that I want directly without any struggle, moving from my own language to this. The second part of it is that appearance again. You know, if you are not where you are, don't say that, but Mark Zuckerberg and, what's in the former deceased Apple CEO, but they only wear black t-shirts and jeans, but they can, because they've already built the credibility, and they don't have the fact that they dress up that way is more of an attraction now because of what they have achieved. And what people perceive that they should dress like, that they should maybe have golden suits, who knows, with diamonds, with diamond petted, or who knows what, but they don't. And as a result, that says something about them in terms of their brand. But if you want to get to that point where you don't know, you have to get the attraction of those who are interested in your product, that's your clients, understand what can stand in your way, in their way of perceiving you, the way that you want to be perceived in terms of quality, and then understand what can make it easier for them to process or to interpret what you want them to interpret as far as you as a service provider. So then you deal with your appearance, you deal with the way that you come across, which then brings us to the last A, which is about articulation. You know, how do you communicate your value proposition? How do you communicate? How do you package your products? If you're bringing in some kind of interesting juice, let's say that is a super juice, but the can looks like an oil can from the garage. You know, how does that help the person that is looking at your can? How do they marry the fact that normally cans of oil that fix cars look like that, and then you're saying that in that thing something can make me feel amazing?
Bit of a disconnect.
There's a disconnect. Although it might be fascinating, but you are giving me a massive task to overcome perceptually, and I don't even know who you are. So I'm not gonna necessarily jump for that. But maybe if you made it more interesting, similar, still keeping, let's say, 70-80% of the image of a juice bottle, but then you added a little bit of fascinating colors, maybe see-through, and then that point of fascination then makes me pick it up from the fridge and think, oh, this looks amazing, let me try it. You know what I mean? So as much as you want to be, then articulate your brand in a unique and authentic way, but you can't be so authentic that you create difficulty for your clients, that they have to work so hard mentally to figure out what is it that you are uniquely selling. There still has to be a massive amount of familiarity as far as what I'm used to, as far as what I know, that can help me then to draw my attention to your product. And so that's—
So Jabu, did you leave for the United States looking like the oil can, and you came back looking like a a well-packaged super juice? What changed? Because obviously we didn't get to experience you before you left for America. So specifically talking about you, because I love listening to you. You are, and this is with no disrespect to anybody else who we've interviewed, you are one of the few people who doesn't and your way through answers. And that's one of my pet hates, and it always has been, I think, being a broadcaster, is people who and who lack the ability to collate their thoughts, where their mouth moves faster than their brain. So what comes out of their mouth often needs quite a bit of deciphering. You, for one, speak, and you said this yourself by your own admission, English, the ability for you to speak English and understand English for you is a massive advantage. Is that something that you were able to improve while you were in the US? Would I now, if I had seen you prior to your departure, would I be looking at a completely different person thinking, wow, that's not Jabu? That process of going to the States, not that I want to dwell on leaving the country and coming back, but I'm just trying to understand, because you went to great lengths to explain how important that journey was and how it literally put you on the map. I'd like to know what happened within that journey, because all of these things that you're mentioning now are important, but I'm not quite understanding what happened while you were in the US that allowed you to become the successful person that you are now.
All right, let me put it this way. My going to the US was more from creating, or rather to, again, creating the perception and the impression that I wanted people. When I was in South Africa, people didn't pay attention to what I was talking about. I was...
You're a dad as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Or is that the cat turning on the television?
Oh, it's this guy's taking long. Let me just play my, anyways. I think the thing is this, that many of us know what we're good at. But until somebody knows, until you are somebody, until you matter, what you do doesn't matter. And also at the same time, also sometimes if what you do doesn't matter, you don't matter. So there is that vicarious, the symbiotic relationship. How do you if what you do matters, how do you then become the person that matters for what you do? And I understood that as far as the authority, if you're talking about the top of the hierarchy of influence, in terms of the hierarchy of influence, like I mentioned, America is at the top. The one thing that it did for me, Paul, I think, let me just to talk about that, is that it emphasized the importance of me being confident, because Americans are not apologetic about who they are. So I was challenged to really look to, who am I as a person on a global stage? Am I a poor South African boy who's grateful to have the opportunity to be in the USA? Or am I a human being who's highly competent, just like anybody else, whether they be from the UK or the United States, and I've got to figure out a way that I can articulate my value without letting what I think of myself, my background, stand in the way. And when you go into the USA, when you're walking down the streets of New York, nobody there cares where you come from. Everybody cares about what they can get from you.
How long were you there for, Jabu, before you came back?
I've been going back and forth. By the way, it wasn't even so intentional to stay. I actually got stuck during COVID-19.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was stuck during that time, which gave me the time actually through Zoom. Look at that. Which gave me the time then through Zoom to articulate my value by doing live events from there to South Africa, from the US, going to different places and showing people where I'm at, what I'm doing.
So isn't it strange how you could be anybody? You could be Joe Blogs introducing yourself. And as you say, the moment you add something that just sounds a little bit more credible, this is Joe Blogs coming to you from Kenya versus Joe Blogs coming to you from the United States of America. Straight away, there's this perception that allows the one to appear more attractive, even if the value proposition isn't there in the beginning. You're automatically attracted to someone based on a whole list of things. And as you said, it might be the clothes they're wearing, how often they smile, how well they speak. So it's not just one factor that influences, it's a whole string of factors. But the fact that you could stand up, or in this case, sit down in front of your laptop and say, I'm coming to you from New York, I'm in my apartment. Straight away, oh, wow, this guy's in America. This must mean something. That to me is fascinating, because it's all well and good grabbing someone's attention with that. But then comes the kicker. Do you have the ability to keep their attention? Because you can have all the bells and whistles, but if you can't deliver, it's going to be a little bit like that super juice, where actually it might as well be in a can that looks like oil, because if it's lousy and terrible and tasteless and doesn't work, nobody's going to buy it. Oh, they'll try it once and that will be it. It's the same thing with us and our brands. We can have the best marketing company, the best brand designer, the best logo designer, the best copywriter. But when it comes to the crunch, if our product doesn't match what the perceived outcome will be of the brand, we're done.
And that's correct. And that's why then the last A, the articulation aspect of it is very important, because articulation is really about that, being able to precisely communicate what it is that you're offering. And what makes it difficult for you to communicate what you're offering? Number one, as you mentioned, the content. Do you have the quality content to back up what you say you can do? If you don't have that, you may be able to articulate the message, but you will not be able to execute the solution, because that still is part of articulating your value, the outcome of what you're doing. We're going to judge you in the end, as you mentioned, by the quality of your outcome. And so I also needed, here's another thing that I also understood very well, Paul, is that once I get that opportunity, I cannot stuff it up. Mm-hmm. So I better be 10, 20, 30 times more prepared than the next person. And one of my components of articulation is blowing your mind. And the thing is that blowing my mind basically means this, is that whatever this I deliver, it's got to be so impressive to you that it becomes very difficult for you to compare it to anything that you've had previously. And if you have anything to compare it to previously, it must be at the top in your top 3 experiences. So everything in terms of, let's talk about me now. Let's talk about the issue of the language. I mean, in certain environments, I intentionally go very diverse in the texture of my language. You know, I could have just said, I become very impressive in the way that I speak. The fact that I'm able to say I become very diverse in terms of the texture of my language. I'm articulating the same thing. It's not bombastic to the fact that it's so divorced from your comprehension that you have to struggle. But you immediately get that picture, that image. As an African, we are orators. We are also storytellers. We understand that language is more than just an expression of thought, but actually is a way of engaging, and it's a way of also being a mediator for the person that you are talking to, that you're bridging gaps of understanding, that you're connecting those synapses, that you're literally you're expanding your consciousness into theirs as they impart theirs into yours, and that there's that oneness that gets built just only through the whole exercise of language. And if you want to be effective in that, then you've got to understand the different contexts within which everybody interprets what you're communicating. And then you've got to find, you know, I'm one of those believers that the beautiful thing about language, about English, is that you can have 5, 6 different words to describe one thing. And each context will have a closer affinity to one particular word than the next. And so you got to then understand those type of things. And I also understood that in terms of America, like if I'm in the USA, Americans respond quite well with the high energy, a lot of words, verbiage type of talk. But if you're speaking to the British audience, for example, then you've got to have that calmness, that staccato in the way you speak, and that, you know, sort of authoritative, a bit more stable, stale, quiet when you're talking to them. And here coming in, let's say in South Africa, then you've got the diversity of our culture, and we're so closely intermingled with each other. You got to bring in the bit of that humor, a bit of that mixing up of the languages, and of course making fun of the politicians and our social issues and stuff like that. It works very well here, but it doesn't do very well in certain environments. Constantly aware that as a brand that communicates that I need to understand, whichever audience I go to, what makes it easier for them to connect with me. So then, which gives me the three things. First one is relatability. Can somebody relate to me? Relatability is about eye level. It's about you and I connecting. It's about connecting with the mind, connecting with the eyes, but also the feeling of that energy in the one space. The second one is relatability. We have my mind just lost my train of thought now. Yeah, I just went blank. So, oh yes, relatability. The second one is inspiration. And inspiration is about the story. It's about, can you see yourself doing what you want to do the same way that I did what I'm doing? Doesn't have to be the same thing. But can you be inspired? Can you be moved by my story that you can literally, in your chair, you literally leave your body in your mind and you go into your space and you can see yourself doing what you're doing as I'm talking. That's what inspiration is that I'm